Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. And if you enjoy true crime stories, make sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, also available on every major podcasting platform. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Smalltooth, Nursing Time Theft Shenanigans. Backstory. For the past few years, I've been a nurse. I spent the first part of my career in the emergency at a small hospital in Canada. We can do basic admissions, surgeries, and critical care, but we'll transfer the really sick ones to larger metropolitan hospitals with more services like cardiology or trauma surgery. Because the population we served was so small, we ran with the bare minimum of nurses to keep the department afloat, usually resulting in an extra patient per nurse compared to the other hospitals, but with a lower acuity level, on average, so it balances out. As a result, we would often be overwhelmed during the second half of the day shift and the start of the night shift when it was the most busy. But due to the low volumes of patients later on in the night, we were often well enough staffed to easily handle the workload. We could safely run even fewer nurses, but management hadn't gone there. Secondly, because we ran with such a small number of nurses, we never had break cover. So if your nursing partner was on break, you would watch double the number of patients. Not a big deal at night, but during the day, this could result in missing our last 30-minute unpaid break on the day shift due to high workload. A last piece of info is that we use teams of 1 emergency nurse, a nurse training to have a higher scope of care, and 1 med-surg nurse, a seasoned nurse awaiting a spot in the additional training program. Because of this, the nurses would give and take report together, so instead of each nurse handling over 4 to 5 patients simultaneously, they hand over 8 to 10 together, so report takes twice as long. Our union had negotiated our contract to counteract any wage theft, allowing us to sign for our unpaid 30-minute break at overtime rates of 1.5 times pay. We missed this break maybe every other day shift, so once during a 2-day, 2-night rotation, as well as sign for an additional 15 minutes of straight time pay in case handover went over our 12-hour shift, which was always. Of course, management didn't like having to pay this out, but it wasn't an issue because the nurses were also stealing time. I know it doesn't sound great, but on those quiet night shifts, we would often take an extra 30 to 45 minutes to sleep, which balanced out those 1.5 to 2 hours of lost pay from the day shifts and handover. Because the workload was so low at the time, and because only 1 emergency physician was on at night, it could be easily managed by 1 nurse. So patient throughput was the same as if 2 nurses were working. We often sit around waiting for orders from the doctor. Furthermore, nurses always left their number with their partner, so we could be called back early if it kicked off and needed all hands on deck. Obviously, if we had many very sick patients, we stuck to the entitled amount only or missed it entirely. Everyone was happy for the first few years I worked there. The management, and therefore government, saved the extra pay without affecting patient throughput, and the extra sleep time on break really helped to maintain nurse well-being, as well as making the switch from nights back to days much easier. Then, one of our less pleasant charge nurses got angry at this. The charge nurse role is like the boss of the unit. On most units with admitted patients, this was an 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock Monday to Friday type of gig that was covered by regular bedside nurses when the charge nurse wasn't there. In emergency, however, we had specific nurses working rotating shifts in this role with a small pay bump, and any gaps in the schedule filled by very senior emergency nurses, as it was a much more unique beast to manage. I say this only to give benefit of the doubt that this nurse was probably stressed out like crazy every shift. So I'm sitting at work in the morning, waiting for the inevitable onslaught when the email pops up stating night shifts are to be limited to union-mandated break time only. I'm a bit pissed off at it, but ultimately, they're right. We're only entitled to a 60 minute of unpaid break time and 45 minutes of paid break time. And to be fair, some nurses were definitely abusing the previous system. One nurse who covered charge would advocate for over 3.5 hours of break time on a night shift, regardless of how sick the patients were, and that would affect patient safety, as it bled into the first part of the night when we were actually still busy. Most of the nurses refused to follow them on this. However, people like this were rare. Most nurses don't come to the emergency to be lazy. This email soon gets posted in our group chat so everyone's aware. A lot of the younger staff, millennials at this time, were aware of our rights and immediately started signing for all missed breaks, as well as additional handover time, as well as helping the older staff understand the contract. I missed my last break that shift and stayed until quarter past shift change for report, so I got an extra $50 gross on my paycheck for that. The charge nurse on that day was surprised when I presented the overtime form for their signature, but I just told them I was following the rules to prevent any pay discrepancies. My next shift at night, there was a sign-in sheet on the desk for us to write our in and out time for breaks, with a space for our phone number too, so they could call us back, even though we weren't paid the extra $4 an hour to be on call, and calling us back should have been paid at overtime rates per the contract. I refused to leave my number, stating that unless there was a code blue, medical emergency usually means there's no pulse, there was no way I was coming back early. Code blues were called overhead, so they didn't need my number. For the next 2 weeks, I stuck to the contract. Every missed break and extended handover was documented. And of course, I signed in and out of my breaks on the dot. I spent so much time on night shifts staring at my phone, waiting for the doctor to give me something to do, as I'd caught up on everything else. It might not seem a lot, but that extra hour of handover pay, plus occasional missed breaks per shift set, would have added up to roughly $2,000 extra per year per full-time nurse, which is a decent amount of change to a publicly funded healthcare system. Eventually, the manager noticed and came around clarifying that while they would sign for any extra wages if we wished, we could also choose to sleep extra on nights if we wished, providing we left our number. I asked for them to email that to me, and while I could have sent that straight to the union rep, I didn't bother, as I had already gotten the sleep time back. I left that job later on and have been very happy at a much bigger hospital for 2 years now. Now I have a nurse come cover mine and my partner's break. There's no teams, and they encourage us to take longer breaks when possible to prevent staff burnout, which was really prevalent at this one. I now document my missed breaks and extra sleep time to make sure it matches up. They're also willing to sign for missed breaks on top of that to help staff retention, but my conscience doesn't let me go that far. I'm just happy to sleep. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Wattmate01. It says, "You weren't stealing time, you were on call. If you're in the building and contactable so that you can do jobs at a moment's notice, you're working." Another commenter down below called OK Initiative 2678 said, "Gotta love when someone in management gets pissy about people bending rules here or there and tries to crack down just to realize that work to rule screws them way harder than it does us." I think people don't realize that if people conform to the rules completely in most government departments, it is very, very expensive. It does sound like OP and the people they were working with had a process that worked for them and didn't have any effects on actual patient care. It just took that one charge nurse to be a little bit pissy, try and make everything go by the rules, and because of them, everybody had to change what they were doing. Quick thank you to everybody who works in medical care. You guys are all awesome. This story comes to us from Possible Seaweed 4815. Malicious Compliance? I used to work at a mid-sized company where our department had its own supply closet. Everyone knew the rules. Take what you need, don't hoard, and keep the area tidy. Simple enough, right? Apparently not for our new micromanaging office manager, Karen. Karen was obsessed with cutting costs. She'd swoop in like a hawk every morning, inspecting the supply closet. If a box of pens was a little lighter, or the post-its weren't perfectly aligned, we'd get a stern email about unnecessary consumption. She even implemented a sign-out sheet for supplies. Want a highlighter? Better justify it in writing. One day, Karen decided to escalate. she put a lock on the supply closet and declared herself the sole key holder. If anyone needed something, they had to email her and wait for her to approve the request. This was, of course, on top of her other duties, so getting a new pen could take hours. Needless to say, productivity started to suffer. Cue Malicious Compliance. A coworker of mine, Tom, was a bit of a prankster, but always stayed within the rules. He decided to test Karen's new system to its limits. Every time he needed anything, no matter how small, he emailed Karen. Need a single paperclip? Email. Need to replace a dried out marker? Email. Stapler jammed? You guessed it, email. Tom's meticulousness inspired the rest of us. Soon, the entire department was flooding Karen's inbox with individual requests. Since Karen insisted on handling every single one personally, she quickly became overwhelmed. Approving requests started taking days instead of hours. Meetings were delayed because people didn't have notebooks. Presentations stalled because someone was waiting for a dry erase marker. Management started noticing the bottleneck. Our department's performance metrics were plummeting, and everyone pointed the finger at the supply chain fiasco. Karen tried to defend her system, claiming we were being wasteful and needed structure. But the evidence was clear. Her micromanagement was backfiring. After a particularly disastrous week, upper management stepped in. They not only revoked Karen's authority over the supply closet, but also gave her a formal reprimand. The lock was removed, the sign-out sheet disappeared, and we went back to the honor system. Karen, humiliated, kept a low profile after that. As for us, we may have lost a week of productivity, but the petty satisfaction of watching Karen drown in her own bureaucracy was worth every second. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called FlakyRun9440. It says, absolutely amazing. Nothing better than consequences rolling down on those who deserve them. And it even returned to the common sense system. Unheard of, you lucky dog. Another commenter down below called TechNot said, 40 years ago, I had a manager like that. It was a typical master lock, so I used a paperclip bent just right. Could open the lock in 2 seconds flat. Then I'd leave it unlocked. I'd unlock it even if I was just walking by the door. She had the only key, so finding it unlocked every day was driving her nuts. She eventually swapped locks. Had to use an actual pick for that one. I still have it. It kind of makes you wonder when somebody takes this kind of level of petty control over something so small like the supply cabinet that they might have something else going on in their life that is completely out of control. So this one little thing that they can control gives them at least a little bit of a sense that they're in control. I don't know, they are a Karen though, so I could be completely off base here. Let me know what you guys think. Comment down below if you're listening on YouTube. This story comes to us from Stendhal Syndrome. Now you can call me every single time. This story took place in the late 90s. I'm sure high school systems are different now, and my kids aren't that old yet. It was my senior year of high school, and I already had enough credits in my junior year to graduate. I got an extra gym credit early because I took martial arts and even taught it. But I changed my mind because I wanted to graduate with my friends. So I loaded up my senior schedule with classes I wanted or that I thought would look good to colleges. I picked a few AP courses like US government, physics, and anatomy and physiology, plus some random classes. The AP classes turned out to be a lot of work, and since I already had good test scores from the previous year, I wasn't too worried about dropping some of them. I ended up dropping physics, government, and a random jewelry 2 class. That left me with 3 open periods a day around lunchtime, which was amazing. I still had 1 AP class, so I figured I wasn't completely slacking. Both my parents worked, so we didn't realize there was a problem until we found out our answering machine was broken. It was the 90s after all. Apparently, my school had been calling 3 times a day to report that I wasn't showing up for a newly assigned study hall. They stuck me in it after I dropped those classes. In previous years, a free period was just a free period, so this was new to me. The funny part was that the woman calling every day was pretty rude. After the first few days, her messages got nasty, yet no one at school said anything to me, and nothing was sent home in writing. Around this time, my mom was winding down her hairstyling career, working 1 week on and 1 week off. So eventually, she started picking up these calls. She basically told the caller that she didn't mind. My grades were good. I could have already graduated, and my college applications were out. It didn't seem like a big deal. That was apparently the wrong thing to say, because the woman read my mom the riot act, calling us irresponsible, threatening to ruin my college applications, calling me brazen, and so on. She just wouldn't stop calling, period after period, even with my parents' approval. My parents finally went to the school in person. By law, the school had to report any unapproved truancy, but the school wouldn't accept my mom's verbal or face-to-face approval for me to leave. They wanted something in writing, and not just a simple note. They wanted a statement that basically admitted they were bad parents harming my education, which my mom refused to give. So my mom looked up the law and found out the school was required to notify parents about every unexcused absence. She started playing dumb, insisting this lady call her every single period I missed. Every time, my mom would hem and haw saying, do I allow him to miss this period? Let me think. Okay, sure, this one time, but call me if he misses anything else, because I'm not sure how I'd feel. Of course, we both knew I was missing 3 periods a day until graduation. They finally stopped calling about a month before I graduated. It was a solid 5 months of my mom messing with this woman named Sarah. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, I'm a little shocked by some of the reactions here about the school. Here's more info some of you might have missed. 1. I could have graduated my junior year. That means the school would have gotten no funding at all if I wasn't there. And you can't just replace a student with someone else waiting in the district. It doesn't work like that. 2. It was a very well-off district, easily in the top 10 in the state at the time, sometimes top 5. And the state itself was wealthy. The school had all the extras. 3. We had 9 periods a day. I had 3 off plus lunch. 4. More importantly, my parents were fine with my schedule, and I was under 18, so their decision should have been enough. Common sense says, look at the student record. I was on track to graduate, hadn't caused trouble, and the law says they should listen to the parents. It was only 3 periods a day in senior year, and I could have already graduated. Regents for what that's worth. My parents approved it, shaking my darn head. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called FoilK. It says, as a parent of a kid who will be in a very similar position next year, a high school junior right now, heavy AP classes, but plans to make their senior year light, I find this absolutely hilarious. I'd probably do exactly the same as your mom. OP responded to this one and said, I'd imagine you now will have to fight the school trying to force your kid into some sweatshop for the school versus actually having periods off. Sweet, sweet capitalism. Another commenter down below called Wells1632 said, I was in the same boat my senior year of high school. I just took a bunch of BS classes the way you did, but we didn't have AP classes, just dual enrollment ones, so I stacked up on as many of those as I could for earned college credit. So much better than AP classes. Eventually got kicked out of my computer class because I read the manual, which turned out to be more than my teacher had done. OP responded to this one and said, holy crap, I got tossed from a class for basically the same thing. Digital Art 1. It was literally on Photoshop version 1.0. No one knew anything about it yet. I took home the manual and went through it like a madman and had something to say to the teacher every single time she opened her mouth because she was wrong like 90% of the time, and I had receipts. That got me sent to the principal, and I'll never forget the line he gave me. Sometimes you just have to respect the human for their title and not their opinion or the work ethic, aka respect the bullshit. Had it reinforced in the military how BS it was. Oh yes, you are so much more important than me because you have 2 patches on your arm and I only have 1. I can prevent the ship from sinking or burning to nothing, but you can really bang out some paperwork. Gotcha. It sounds to me like whoever was making all these phone calls was really concerned about their school's funding because, as I understand it, public schools do get funded based on attendance. So if you have an unexcused absence, they don't get paid as much. So they work hard to make sure you're there. They definitely didn't need to be rude about it though, but I feel like there was probably somebody above them harping down on them saying, every single time somebody misses a class, you give them a call and find out what's going on. If you enjoyed daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to give us a rating of 5 stars on whichever podcasting platform you enjoyed the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.